This bell sleeve hoodie dress, perfect for Halloween and everyday wear. Let me show you how. Hey guys, I'm T. If you love cozy wearable crochets with a twist, you're in the right place. We're making a gothic chic high-low crochet dress with dramatic bell sleeves and a hood. Perfect for Halloween parties, fall festivals, or adding edge to your everyday wardrobe. If you're new here, welcome. I share wearable crochet tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday, so tell a friend, tap the bell, and subscribe so you never miss an upload. And if you enjoyed the video, give it a big thumbs up or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it helps keep these tutorials free. Any category 3 yarn will work. I used a total of 495 grams, that's 1,780 yards, along with a 4 and 5.5 millimeter hook. Pattern link below. Use code TCDDIY for a discount. Stick to the end for this week's pattern giveaway. We're mainly using the Trinity stitch for this project. Never done it before? Don't worry, I'll walk you through it step by step along with a few other stitches on screen now, so pause to check it out. You can adjust it for your size. We explain how to in the video, so without further ado, here's how to crochet your own bell sleeve hoodie dress. Getting this dress started, we're crafting the front panel first. This panel is worked vertically, side to side instead of top to bottom, which creates the flattering rib texture. We'll alternate between the Trinity stitch rows and single crochet row. We're all going to grab our category 3 yarn, make a slip knot. Then grab our 4 millimeter hook. First, measure just below our underarm down to our under bust line. Write that number down, you'll need it for later. Now chain that odd number to match the measurements. For a size small, I chained 25, that's 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters. We're going to begin with a Trinity stitch row. The first Trinity stitch is going to start with a single crochet. So block off that last chain and chain 1. That chain 1 is our turning chain. Into the chain that we blocked off for the second chain from our hook, insert with 1 single crochet. Then we're going to pull up 3 loops to get a total of 4. So into that same chain that our single crochet is in, insert, pull through. Into that next chain, pull through, next chain, pull through for 4 loops on our hook. Perfect. Now yarn over, pull through all 4 of those loops. We're going to close off our Trinity stitch with a chain. We want to make sure that we're not tugging too tightly with that chain, otherwise the following row can be a little too tight to work into. Now the following is going to be worked a little bit differently, but same idea. We're still going to pull up 3 loops, ultimately getting 4 loops on our hook. Into that last stitch that our previous Trinity stitch is worked into, so into this occupied stitch, pull through. Next stitch, pull through. Next stitch, pull through for 4 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through all 4, and loosely chain 1. We're going to repeat this Trinity stitch until we have 2 stitches left. So just to do it once more, into that same stitch that our previous Trinity stitch is worked into, pull through. Next stitch, pull through. Next stitch, pull through. When we have 4 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through 4, chain 1. Now this project is going to be a 2-row repeat, so it's just a Trinity stitch row and then a single crochet row. So there will be a distinct front and back. The outside of our panels is going to show the front of our Trinity stitch row, therefore the back of our single crochet row. And that's just to show the really pretty ribbing that we get. 2 chains left at the end of our row 1. We're going to do our last Trinity stitch, but this one is going to be an increase. It's going to start off the same way as our previous Trinity stitches. So into that last stitch that our previous Trinity stitch was worked into, pull through. Into that next stitch, which is that second to last, pull through. Into that next stitch, which should be our last, and pull through for 4 loops on our hook. Yarn over, pull through all 4. For this last one, since we're doing an increase, we're also going to include a single, a half double, and a double crochet all into that last stitch. So we aren't going to chain 1 for the last one. Into that same last chain, insert with 1 single, same last chain with 1 half double, same last chain with 1 double crochet, and now our row 1 is complete. With the increase that we just did, we should all have 2 more stitches than chains that we made. We're going to follow this up with a single crochet row to lock in that rib texture. Chain 1, flip our work, and just put 1 single crochet into every stitch, giving us the same amount of stitches as our previous row. Look at us, we're doing great. We just completed our first 2 rows. For this underarm, we're going to repeat this Trinity stitch single crochet sequence, increasing at the end of every Trinity stitch row until our piece measures from our side to the top of your underarm crease. Make sure you're checking your measurements as you go. For my size small, I made a total of 7 rows. That's just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters. Make sure that we end right after an odd number row for everyone, and that's going to keep the pattern aligned for the next shoulder section. But now that we have completed our underarm section, we're going to build upwards towards the shoulder. So measure from our underarm crease straight up to the top of our shoulder. Now chain an even number to match that measurement. I chained 20, that's just about 4 inches or 10 centimeters. And you want to make sure that you record that count, you'll need that for later. We're now going to continue on with our sequence, working a single crochet row first, then followed by a Trinity stitch row. Now just working this first row, block off that last chain and chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, continue with 1 single crochet into every chain. Then also 1 single crochet into every stitch. Quick tip, sometimes when we're working down our chain, it can twist on us, so it looks like we don't have any stitches to work into. If that's the case, just twist your chain so that we work into the tops of the stitches from our previous row, and just continue on from there. Our first shoulder row is completed. Like I said, the following row is going to be a Trinity stitch row because we are following the same stitch sequence to get the same texture. The last Trinity stitch, we aren't going to do an increase, so just make your way down with your Trinity stitches. We'll meet back when we all have 2 stitches left, just so I can show you how we're going to do our regular Trinity stitch that ends a row. We're at the end of our second shoulder row. We're now all going to do a Trinity stitch that does not increase, so it's just going to stay blunt. How that works is the same way that all the other Trinity stitches worked, so we're going to pull up 3 loops. Into that same last stitch that our previous Trinity stitches worked into, pull up a loop. Into the next, which is that second to last stitch, pull through. Next stitch, pull up for 4 loops on our hook. Yarn over, pull through all 4. Now to close off this Trinity stitch row, just 1 single crochet into that same last chain. Now we should still have the same amount of stitches as our previous row. Now repeat the single crochet Trinity stitch sequence until our panel reaches from the side of our body over to the edge of our neck. Check as you go just to make sure that everything is fitting nicely. And for size small, I worked a total of 18 rows. Make sure you end right after an even number row. That's going to keep the pattern aligned for the neckline, and record that number as well because we're going to use that later too. Pause here, check out your panel. Your panel should extend smoothly from our underarm to the shoulder to the edge of your neck without puckering. For the last row, count your stitches down, placing your stitch marker into an even numbered stitch at mid clavicle. Record that stitch that you marked. This marks where your scoop will begin. And now we're ready to shape the neckline scoop. Just to let y'all know, with my shoulder portion completed, my total width is just about 4 inches or 10 centimeters. Now we're going to begin decreasing. So just work a Trinity stitch row all the way up, then we're all going to decrease into the 4 stitches right before stitch markers. We've made our way up with our first neckline row. We should all have 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches right before a stitch marker. Now we're going to do our Trinity stitch decrease. So how we're going to do that is it's going to start the same way as our previous Trinity stitches. So into that last stitch that our previous Trinity stitches worked into, pull through. Next stitch, pull through. Next stitch, pull through. We should have 4 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over and pull through all 4. That should leave us with 2 stitches right before a stitch marker. Then simply do a decrease of 2 half doubles. So yarn over into that next stitch, which is our second to last, pull through, also into that next stitch, which is our last, pull through for 4 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through all 4. That's pretty similar to a Trinity stitch. Now a single crochet row with no increases and no decreases, lucky us. Continue with 1 single crochet into the rest of our stitches. Now go on ahead and repeat our Trinity stitch single crochet sequence, making sure that we are decreasing at the end of our Trinity stitch row. Quick tip, we will have 2 less stitches for each of these rows than our previous row until we reach mid-chest. Now for a size small, I now have a total of 25 rows. This width is just about 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters. Now go ahead and record your row count. We will need this for the rebuild. Also just pause here to check out the neck scoop depth to make sure that you're liking where it's sitting. Now we're just going to have 1 middle row, and it's just going to be a single crochet row all the way down. No increases, no decreases. This row anchors our scoop, and it's going to make sure that it's flat and even. We are now at the halfway mark of our front panel. Now we're just going to basically mirror everything that we did here on the other side. So we're going to begin with a Trinity stitch row, this time ending with an increase. We already know how to do that, so make your way up, then close off the row with the same increase that we did for the underarm. First increase row for the neckline, done. Again, we should have 2 more stitches than our previous row, then another single crochet row. Again, no increases, no decreases. Repeat this Trinity single crochet sequence, making sure that we're still increasing at the end of our Trinity stitch row for the same number of rows that we worked during the scoops decrease. I had a total of 7, so not including my 1 middle row, I'm going to do 7 more rows. We want to do that just to make sure that we're matching our previous symmetry. So pause here and compare both sides of the next scoop and adjust if needed. So if you guys want, go ahead and just place it over each other. Should lay on top of each other quite nicely. And now from here, we're going to make a chain for the same number of stitches that we recorded at our mid clavicle stitch marker. This chain closes the next scoop and reconnects the neckline. Now with our neckline scoop closed and our chain reconnected, it's time to mirror the first shoulder. So if y'all remember, we started with a single crochet row all the way down. Then the following row is a Trinity stitch row all the way up just to match this beautiful texture that we have. Then repeat our single Trinity stitch sequence, matching the same amount of rows that we earlier recorded. That's going to keep the neckline nice and balanced and the shoulder seams aligned once when we get there. For a size small, I worked 11 rows here. Now go ahead and pause here, double check that both of your shoulders are symmetrical. And on your final row, count your stitches downwards from the outer shoulder row and place a stitch marker into that stitch that matches the number of chains we made when building up to the shoulder. Now that is going to mark where our curve will begin. Now that gives me a total of 9.5 inches or 24 centimeters. And now we're finishing up the front panel by shaping the second underarm. Start with a Trinity stitch row, decreasing into the stitch before our underarm marker. Then follow it up with a single crochet row. Then just repeat this Trinity single crochet sequence, making sure that we decrease at the end of our Trinity stitch rows for the same number of rows that we recorded during our first underarm section. So for my size small, I worked 7 rows first, so I'm going to match the first underarm here. We want to make sure that we are matching the earlier row count exactly. This is going to keep the underarm shaping nice and symmetrical. Now your last underarm row should end with the same number of stitches as your foundation chain, so go ahead and pause here to confirm. Once we have the same number of rows as our first underarm, we are all done with the front panel. Just to let y'all know, I have a total of 11 inches, 28 centimeters. I'm now going to cut, then I'm going to walk y'all through the back panel because it's pretty similar to the front actually. Now the back panel shaping will mirror the front panel, just without the neck scoop, which makes this section such a breeze to work. We're all going to begin with the same odd number chain we used for the first underarm section. Again, we measured from 1 inch below our underarm down to our bust line. That chain was an odd number to match. Mine was 25. Then we're going to follow the same Trinity stitch row with an increase, then a single crochet row, and repeating that Trinity single crochet sequence for the same number of rows that you worked for the front panel's underarm. So for my size small, I worked 7 rows here. Go ahead and match your front panel rows exactly. Once when you have your underarm rows, go ahead and pause here. Just make sure that everything is looking right and is all matching up. Then I'm going to make the same even number chain that we made for the front panel to reach the top of our shoulder. So for me, that was a chain 20. So for my back panel, I made a chain 20. Then from here, just like how we did the front panel's first shoulder, we're going to work a single crochet row down, then a Trinity stitch row all the way back up. And repeat the single Trinity stitch row sequence for the entire back until you reach the opposite underarm crease, making sure that we all end right after an even number row. Now FYI, this back panel might be a little bit more narrow than the front panel because the front panel does need to accommodate for the bust. If that's the case, that's fine, completely normal. As long as it fits you or the intended wearer, you're good to go. Then make sure on your final row, count your stitches down from the outer shoulder row and place the stitch marker into the same stitch that matches the number of chains that we made when building up the shoulder. Then finish up the back panel by repeating the second underarm section from the front panel. So that is just working a Trinity stitch row, decreasing at the end, then followed by a single crochet row for the same amount of rows that we have for our other underarm portions. Then cut, then we can seam everything together. Once the entirety of the back panel is completed, next thing we're going to do is seam everything together. But first, we're going to insert some stitch markers into the edges of our underarm rows along the bottom, just so we know where that's at, so we can actually frame out the high-low portion of the skirt now. Counting from the bottom edges, we're going to count out the same amount of rows that we made for our underarm portion. Everyone's first side row is a side Trinity stitch row. So here's 1, 2, which is our single crochet row, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So for those of you that have my numbers, I made a total of 7 underarm rows. I'm inserting a stitch marker into my 7th side row, and repeat for all of the underarm sections, front panel included. Now, time to seam everything together using a single crochet seam. This technique creates a sturdy, stretchy join that won't pop underwear. So let's start with the shoulders. We're going to place our front panel on top of our back panel, making sure that the front of the Trinity stitch rows are faced in on each other. Then insert your hook into the top corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Then we're just going to work 1 single crochet through both layers, inserting our hook in through every side row. Find our first side row within the front panel, which is a side single crochet row. Find that top loop, insert, same top loop within the back panel, insert with a single, and once more into that next side row, which is a side Trinity stitch row for everyone. So find that top loop, insert, same top loop within the back, insert, and single. Well, you don't have any more side rows left, cut, then repeat on the other side. Shoulder seams, checked off. Now to do the sides. It's pretty much the same thing, but a little bit easier because we have actual stitches to work into, so making sure that our work is still flipped wrong side out. Insert your hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Find that first stitch in the front, insert, first stitch in the back, insert, and single crochet. And continue single crocheting in through both panels at the same time. Panels are seamed. Now we're going to work on the waistband. We're going to start by creating the base row. So making sure that our work is flipped right side out, so all of our seams are along the inside, and we're going to insert our hook into the stitch that's nearest to the side seam. Then 1 single crochet in through every side row. A quick chain 1 just to secure, that doesn't actually count as a stitch. Now, finding our first side row, this is mine right here. Find that top loop and insert with 1 single crochet. This is my following side row, which is a side single crochet row. We're going to find that top loop and put 1 single crochet as well. For this base row, we do need to bring our stitch markers down with us. So once we reach our stitch marker side row, we're going to place 1 single crochet in through that side row and make sure that we are bringing our stitch marker down as well, because that's going to frame off where the high-low detail is for the skirt portion. This single crochet row is going to be as wide as this part can stretch, so once when it's completed, try it on. If it's too tight or too loose, go ahead and redo some stitches with a different tension. Single crochet row, check. Stitch markers into the same spots, check. We're going to complete the single crochet row by slip stitching into that chain space that we made when we started this row. So insert and pull through everything. That slip stitch forms a stitch, doesn't count as a stitch though, that's just to connect. Now we're all going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the waistband to be. You can make this as long or short as you'd like. I like for mine to be just about 2.5 inches or 6 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 12. With our chain, we're going to slip stitch into the back bumps. Block off that last chain and chain 1. That chain 1 is our turning chain. Into that chain that we blocked off, we're going to twist our chain to look at the back of our stitches, and we can see all of these back bumps. We're going to insert into that second chain's back bump, yarn over, and gently pull through everything. Pull through loosely, because otherwise the following row can be too tight to work into and could be a nuisance. So again, into that next back bump, insert, yarn over, gently pull through. First slip stitch row is down. Now we're going to anchor it down into the base. Finding that first stitch into the base, this is mine, insert with a slip stitch. That slip stitch into the base doesn't count as a stitch. That's basically just to complete this first row and connect it. Then, to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch up that next available stitch into the base. Still doesn't count as a stitch. That second slip stitch basically counts as our turning chain, and flip our work. And to get that stretchy knit-like look, 1 back loop slip into every stitch. So just making sure we're working in through that last stitch from our previous row. not into those slip stitches into the base. If we do, we'll accidentally be increasing. Slip stitch into that back loop or the loop that's furthest away from us. Yarn over, pull through everything, and continue with one back loop slip into the rest of our stitches. Just to anchor it down together again, at the end of our row 2, chain 1, flip. Work our way up with our row 3 with back loop slip stitches, then I'll meet you back at the base. We now have 1, 2, 3 rows. Now to connect it into the base again, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base. Remember, doesn't count as a stitch. We're not going to work into it. Then, since we're here, to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch up that next stitch, flip our work, and back loop slip stitch back down. Repeat these 2 rows, so no increases, no decreases. Every row should have the same amount of stitches as chains that we made until we make our way all the way around. It's pretty simple. The only thing that we want to make sure is that we're bringing our stitch markers with us once we're worked into that stitch. Once the band is complete, double check, make sure that your stitch markers are into the correct spots. Then we're going to seam it closed, doing an outside loop slip stitch seam. Now this seam is going to keep it flexible, nearly invisible from the outside. Into the first stitch into the front panel, insert only in through that front loop or the loop that's nearest to us. First stitch into the other corner, insert only in through that back. This is the reason why we worked into the back bumps when we did our first row. We should get 3 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through all 3. Again, next into the front loop. Then next stitch into the back, insert into that back loop. Yarn over and pull through all 3. Continue until we don't have any more stitches left, then cut. Our waistband is complete. Now we're on to the sleeves. To start the sleeve, we're going to do a single crochet row, but we want to show the back of the single crochets to match the same texture that we have in the front. So we're actually going to start with our work flipped wrong side out. Okay, everyone's single crochet seam along the outside? Cool. Now we're going to insert our hook into the top stitch that we have within the side seam so that we can work into our armhole. And working our way up our underarm, we're going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets in through every side row, chain 1 just to secure. This is my first side row right here. Find that top loop and insert with 2 single crochets. I'm going to weave in my tail ends as I go as well because I do not wish to do them later. And that's 2 single crochets into the top of that side row. This is my next side row, which is a side single crochet row. Find that top loop and insert with just 1. Now just make our way all the way up and around with our single crochets. Once we reach our stitches, we're going to have just a stitch to work into, so just 1 single crochet in through there. When we've made our way around, I'll meet you back before we close off the row. That single crochet row, nearly complete. If we did our math correctly, we should currently have an even number of stitches. But since we're working with the Trinity, we need to end on an odd. So simply put 1 single crochet into that same last side row. Then slip stitch into that chain space. Then we're going to flip our work right side out so all of our seams are now along the inside. And we do want to make sure that we're keeping track of this number of stitches and the amount of rows that we're going to have and all the details because we're going to do this on the other side as well. Now the sleeve is going to be worked in 2 parts. One is going to be from the top of the shoulder down to about where our elbow is. That's going to be the fitted portion of the sleeve with our 4mm hook. Then we're going to switch out to our 5.5mm hook. Then the fun begins and we can start with our bell sleeve. Now we're going to do Trinity stitch rows, single crochet rows with decreases until we reach our elbow. I'm going to show you guys how to do each, then you guys can implement those decrease rows into wherever you'd like for them to be depending on the fit of the sleeve that you want. Everyone's row 2 is a Trinity stitch row. Just like before, that first Trinity stitch starts with a single. Since we already know how to do our Trinity stitches, make your way all the way around. When we have 4 stitches left, do our Trinity stitch decrease. That should give us 2 less stitches than our previous row. Then I'll meet you back to close off the row and start our single crochet row together. Our Trinity stitch decrease row for our sleeve, done. Now, just like the last row, slip stitch into that chain space that we made when we started this row and pull through everything to connect the end to the beginning of the row. Remember that that slip stitch connection doesn't count as a stitch. Now for the sleeve, you are going to decrease into the single crochet rows as well. So chain 1, we do want to make sure that we're flipping our work to make sure that we maintain the texture of our piece and continue with 1 single crochet into every stitch, but leave the last 3. Now, just a decrease of 3 singles. Third to last, pull through. Second to last, pull through. And also that last, pull through, yarn over, pull through 4. We should end with 2 less stitches than our previous row, then slip stitch into that chain space. So far, we should have 3 rows completed. That first single crochet row, a decreased Trinity stitch row, and also a decreased single crochet row. For the rest of the length of our sleeve, we're just going to alternate between a Trinity stitch and single crochet row, same way that we did for the body. But it's up to you where you want to do your decreases. The decreases will be done the same way as these 2 previous rows, until we work our way down to our elbow, making sure that we end right after a Trinity stitch row. Now, a few recommendations. 1, make sure you're keeping track of which rows you decrease into. This sleeve is going to be repeated on the other side. Every row, decrease rows included, they're going to end on an odd number of stitches, so just double check and make sure. And when you do your decreases, I highly suggest doing 2 decrease rows in a row. If you just decrease into the Trinity stitch rows, it could get the seam to slant just a little bit. So if you can, a Trinity decrease, then a single crochet decrease. I'm going to get the rest of my sleeve done. When I have this portion completed, I will meet you back to let you guys know exactly where I decreased into, then the bell. So the length of my sleeve is pretty much done. I've reached my elbow. I have a total of 52 rows. This length is just about 11 inches or 26 centimeters. Now, where I did my decreases was rows 2 through 5, then 25, 26, 31, 32, 37, 38, 43, 44. Now we're going to switch out to our 5.5 millimeter hook to get started on the bell. Now some quick instructions when it comes to shaping the bell. We're going to be working 1 single crochet row with 4 evenly spaced increase, followed by a regular Trinity stitch row. We're not increasing into those. When it comes to doing the single crochet rows, we don't need to count the exact amount of stitches that we're going to increase into. We just want the increases divided roughly into quarters. So place your stitch marker at each quarter point, even if the spacing isn't exactly perfect. That's actually bound to happen since we end on an odd number of stitches. Then, just once we reach every stitch marker, we're going to put 2 single crochets into that same stitch to increase. Now, increasing this way ensures that the bell will be balanced and also ensures that our stitches always ends on an odd stitch count, because the Trinity stitch needs to end on an odd stitch count. And working this first row of single crochets into our previous row with our 5.5 millimeter hook might be a little tight, totally normal for this first row. First bell sleeve row, all done. Following row is a Trinity stitch row, absolutely no increases, no decreases. And for the rest of the bell, we're just going to continue to repeat these 2 previous rows until we get the length of the bell sleeve that we want. When we have 1 done, repeat on the other side. Then time to get cozy with adding the hood. My bell sleeve is looking pretty dramatic, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want. And for my sleeve, I have a total of 100 rows. That's just about 22 inches or 56 centimeters. Then, make a second. Next, onto the hood. Step 1 for the hood, try our piece on. We're going to mark off the collarbone points first. Begin by placing your stitch marker into the stitches that's just about 1 inch beneath your collarbone on both sides of the front panel. Now this is just where your collarbone naturally sits when the dress is on. We're going to count upwards from the top of our neckline cutout up until that point. I inserted my stitch marker into the 13th stitch just from the top of our neckline. Now we're going to do an increase single crochet row, still using our 5.5 millimeter hook. Since our work is still flipped right side out, right side up, we're going to insert our hook into that right stitch marker stitch and work across the back to this other stitch marker stitch. We're going to be putting 2 single crochets in through every stitch, then also 2 single crochets in through every side row within the back panel just to get that dramatic hood. And now just to make sure we all end on an odd number, just put 1 additional single crochet into that last stitch. Then from here, it's just going to be a straight rectangle all the way up with our hood. So chain 1, flip our work, and just do our Trinity stitch all the way around. Following row, single crochet row, again, no increases, no decreases until we get the total height of our hood. Height of my hood, complete. Last step is to seam it. Now the seam that we're going to do is actually going to be the same seam that we did for the sides, so just a single crochet seam. We are going to start by flipping our hood wrong side out. Then just sandwiching the corners of our hood together, placing our hook into the corner stitches and doing the same single crochet seam all the way down. And when we don't have any more stitches left to work into, cut, then flip your work right side out. Hood completed, all seamed, nice and cozy. Now to get started on the dress portion, we are switching back out to our 4mm hook, but that's just for the base single crochet row. Now everyone's hook is going to need to be placed into a very specific spot. So all together, work, flip right side out. We're going to look at the back panel and our waistband furthest away from us. Insert our hook into the back panel's right stitch marker stitch and start with a single crochet row. Just one single crochet in through every side row. Okay, home stretch, the single crochet row is completed. We're now going to switch back out again to our 5.5mm hook. Now taking a look at the front panel now, work still flipped right side out though, our hook should be within the back panel's left stitch marker. That's perfect. We're now going to chain an odd number of chains for the highest point that we want our dress to be. We are going to work into this chain, but this is basically just to see how high we would like for it to be in the front. And that's simply just a measurement from our waistband down to our hem height. And just make sure you write down that stitch count so that we can keep track as we go. Once we have the length of the skirt that we want, we're going to insert our stitch marker into that last chain, but we are going to continue on with the chain, so reinsert your 5.5mm hook. I chained 61, that's 17 inches or 32 centimeters for the high point of my dress. Now I have 14 stitches in between my stitch markers. To get the length of the back, I'm going to add that amount of stitches to itself. So I'm going to add 14 to 14. That's going to give me additional 28 chains to make from this chain that we're currently making. So in total, my chain is going to be 89. And with our chain, we're going to begin our high-low shaping. And with our first row being a single crochet row, we're going to start with a decrease of 3 double crochets. So chain 3, so yarn over into the 4th chain from our hook, pull through, next pull through, next pull through for a total of 5 loops on our hook. Yarn over and pull through just the first 4 loops, leaving us with 2 loops, then yarn over, pull through 2. Then continue with 1 single crochet into the rest of our chains. And just in case you're wondering, we're doing double crochets along the edges of our single crochet row just to get a little bit of height, because if we do a decrease of 3 single crochets, which it is possible, but since we're doing so many, it may start to curve on us. And once we're at the end of our single crochet row, we're going to slip stitch, making sure we're working towards the front of our piece, because we want to make sure that the back of the single crochet row is shown. And we're just connecting it the exact same way that we did for the waistband. So just slip stitching into the next 2 stitches into the base, flip our work, and work our Trinity stitch all the way down, closing off the row with a decrease, again giving us 2 less stitches than our previous row. And all we're doing is just repeating these 2 rows until we're worked into our next stitch marker stitch. If we're keeping track of our work, every row should have 2 less stitches than our previous row. So once we're worked into our stitch marker stitch, we should have worked our way all the way up to that original chain that we made for the height that we wanted our dress to be. Now we're all working across the front of our dress, and we're going to continue with our Trinity stitch single crochet row sequence all the way across, no increases, no decreases. And since everyone should have ended along the outer edge after a Trinity stitch row, the following row is a single crochet row, so chain 1, flip our work, 1 single crochet into every stitch, connect it into the base the same way that we've been doing so far, then work our way down with our Trinity stitches. Again, no increases, no decreases, until we're worked into the stitch right before our following stitch marker stitch. We have just shimmied our way across the front of our dress. Now we're in the stitch right before our stitch marker. To match the incline that we have here, we're going to do increases until we reach our other stitch marker within the back. We all should have ended within the base. We're going to do our following Trinity stitch row back down, closing off the row with an increase. The same increases that we did for the underarm. Then our following row is a single crochet row. Starts off with an increase of 3 double crochets. For the same reason why we did a decrease of 3 double crochets on the other side, then single crochet into the rest of our stitches, and connection into the base, still the same. Repeat these 2 rows until we're worked into our next stitch marker stitch. Alrighty, the increased side of our dress portion is completed. Now working across the back. Just like how we worked across the front, Trinity stitch, single crochet rows, no increases, no decreases, all the way across the back. The back has been completed the same exact way that we did the front. Now we're just going to seam it together, but this seam is going to be the same seam that we did for the sides and for the hood. So just to talk you guys through it, we're going to do a single crochet seam. So flip it wrong side out, single crochet all the way up. Once we don't have any more stitches, cut. Then we are all done. And there you have it, your very own spooky hooded Trinity stitch dress made just in time for Halloween. I am so proud of how this turned out and I can't wait to see your versions. If you make your own, post it in our community tab. Now I want to hear from you guys. What yarn color are you using for this dress? Are you going classic black, witchy purple? Drop your answer in the comments below. Now enter this week's pattern giveaway for our cozy herringbone beanie and our chic cable stitch scarf by telling us what is your favorite candy. Mine has probably got to be Tootsie Rolls. Now if you love this tutorial, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss a new pattern. We drop fresh content every Sunday and Wednesday. Want more? Find us on Instagram and TikTok at TCDDIY for behind the scenes content, pattern sneak peeks, and daily crochet inspiration. Thank you guys so much for crocheting with us today. Happy hooking, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!